And welcome. Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome along to the Helium Down Under channel. My name is Ian. I'm your host for this video, as with all of the content here on the Helium Down Under channel. Now, I've got to say, guys, that it has been a very long time since I've been here in front of the camera actually recording a video on my own. Just recently, I had David from the RF shop where we did a bit of a joint call, and we'll be doing plenty more of those moving forward. But guys, this is the first one on my own with a topic that has been high on demand. But if this is your first time watching this channel or viewing any of the content here, guys, if I could ask you to hit the subscribe button, smash up the like at any point through the video when you actually see content that is worthwhile and it helps you in your search for whatever it is you're searching for. But the Helium Down Under channel, we're a channel that's focused on helium, IoT, the AU915 frequency band, otherwise known as the Great Land Down Under in the world of helium. Okay, so what is the content of today's call? Well, it is none other than the 4G setup. Okay, so guys, this has become really almost a daily question on the Facebook page and the Discord group. People very eager about getting them set up with a 4G system or LTE system to run their hotspots. Now, this wonderful little image here is not actually my own. I really wish it was, but in fact, I will be having a system created like this very soon, because the great news for myself is that all of my hosted hotspots that have been out there with hosts that have been waiting for their own hotspots to arrive, well, they have all started to actually get their own deliveries, which means that my hotspots are coming back to me. So very soon, guys, this little jigger here is going to be very similar to what I will have set up here at my place. But of course, as per usual, guys, it's very important to make sure that that you understand what the objective of these videos is for. It's all about basically is helping you to build a better network, the people's network, the IoT network that we call Helium. If we can all pull together and have good, strong setups, then it is going to help us all. And that's my objective. I've got my own hotspot cluster here in Brisbane, but across the country, it is growing at a staggering rate. And look, whilst I have got a little bit of an interest and past experience in RF through the operation of CB radios in the days of the 80s and 90s, I am definitely not an RF engineer, nor am I a financial advisor. Goodness me, guys, I mean, when it comes to helium, only a few months ago, I was potentially where you are, brand new, looking to get started. So what I would encourage you to do is take the information that I present here today and do your own research. I'm going to give you as much information as I can. I'm going to tell you my own journey. I'm going to tell you what I'm using. I'm going to be telling you exactly how I actually have 5 systems right now that are running out there at host locations utilizing a 4G system. So I'll be telling you all of that, but please do your own research. Don't spend any money or invest any money that you can't afford to lose. Whilst I think helium is a great long-term plan, guys, none of us have got a crystal ball. We do not know what tomorrow is going to bring, so please make sure that you don't invest what you can't afford to lose. So I guess we've really got to ask, I mean, you look, why would you actually even want to Why would you actually want to set up a 4G system? I mean, after all, your hotspot, you know, whether it's a Heltec or a SenseCap or whether it's a Milesight or a Nebra, goodness knows, you name it, they can all hook up to your own NBN, your home internet. They can hook up via Wi-Fi or they can hook up via Ethernet. And you may be thinking, well, why would you bother even going down the path of needing to run a 4G system? And there's a few reasons that I think it is. And obviously, if you're watching this video and you've actually sourced it out, then maybe you've got one of these reasons. But number one, of course, is that there is no broadband connection available where you are. So you might have an off-grid system like I actually had on the front slide. That's my objective. I plan on having a number of off-grid systems that are actually out in rural areas on the outer fringe of Brisbane, so that I can help to build that outer network and also leverage off the network that has been built by myself and others in the Brisbane suburbs. So no broadband connectivity, we can take care of that with a 4G system. If you are working with hosts like I have recently, one of the challenges that you may face when you go and approach a person, whether it be family, friends, neighbors, or probably not your neighbors because you've probably got one at home yourself. But one of the challenges you face is most people are quite protective of their internet connections, and they want to know, what are you hooking up to my internet, and what does it do, and is this secure, and all the rest of it. Well, guys, one of the best things that I've actually found to negate all of that problems is to use 4G. That way you are not using their home internet. All you're essentially doing is placing this little box of tricks on their roof or in their house or whatever it happens to be, and it runs off its own internet. Distance from the main router. Maybe you are running a system where your main household router is some distance away from where your hotspot is going to be. Maybe your hotspot is at the other end of the house, or potentially even the other end of the block, because that's the best location for your antenna. And of course, you could run for Wi-Fi, but with long distance, that's not going to be very good. And you could also run Ethernet, which is the best option if it's at all available. But the long stretch could be just a little bit difficult. So 4G is definitely an option. Speed and stability. For those of us in the city region, we are probably used to actually having blistering NBN speed. And even if it's a slow speed, it's probably quite capable of running a Helium Hotspot. But there are locations in Australia and around the world where internet speed or stability, and stability is probably the biggest thing here. Speed is not as relevant, but internet stability is something that we do need to have on the Helium blockchain in order to really participate to the full level in proof of coverage and obviously data transfer. So speed and stability through a 4G connectivity is generally going to be more stable than a flaky NBN connection. And of course, there is also flexibility of contract. So if you are looking to actually host your unit at a location, or maybe you're in a rental facility and you might only be there for a few months, you might be there for whatever it happens to be, you don't want to enter into a long-term contract for home internet, whereas the good thing with most of the 4G plans is they do come with a month-to-month option. All of mine do, and I'll explain that as we go through. Okay, so here is one of the things that I do see raised frequently is people actually come into the Facebook group or they come into Discord and they say, I've bought myself a 4G SIM and it's not working. Why isn't it working? I've gone and bought a Telstra, I've gone and bought an Optus, a Dodo, a Vodafone, you name it. People go and purchase these plans and a SIM card, and it works perfectly on their phone. They can in fact surf the internet on their phone. So realistically, you'd be thinking if you could do those things, then well, you can probably also hook up to a hotspot. But unfortunately, guys, that's not how it works, because in Australia, and in fact in many countries around the world, our 4G plans actually sit behind CG-NAT. Now, look, I'm not a terribly technical person here, but essentially there is a block, and it all comes down to we need to have an IP address. An IP address in order to be able to be found out there on the big wide world, on the interwebs. You need to have an IP address. IP addresses are not an endless supply. There are only X amount in the world to choose from. Obviously, SIM cards is one of those things that SIM cards, I have got about 15 SIMs in my house right now. Think about your place. Have you got a couple of mobile phones? Have you got a laptop with a SIM in it? All of those things, if they had their own IP address, we would be running out of IP addresses. So the way that the ISPs have got around that is they create something what is known as CG-NAT. And your SIM card doesn't actually have an IP address in the same way that your home internet would have. And the carrier actually has a number or a series of numbers, and they have a different mechanism, which I don't fully understand, which essentially still allows you to surf the internet, make phone calls, etc., without having your own IP address. But it is imperative for what we do with Helium for us to actually have an IP address to be able to work with. So we need to remove ourselves from out behind the CG-NAT blockade. Now, it is also worth mentioning at this point, depending on when you actually watch this video, this content may no longer be accurate, because I'm not 100% certain on this, but I do feel that when Helium light hotspots or data hotspots are more common, is that those hotspots will be able to use any any 4G SIM card, and CGNet will no longer be an issue. Don't quote me on that as that being absolute gospel, but that's what I'm working on at the moment. So anyway, how do we address this whole CGNet? What are we going to do to get around that? Great news is that there are options available to us. So which carriers will actually work for you with your need for 4G coverage that's outside of CGNet. The only two options, guys, I want to put this up there in big, bold writing across your screen right now. In fact, I would do that if I had more time with the presentation, but I'm just going to reinforce that it is only business plans from Telstra or Optus will offer the full functionality that you need in order to run your hotspots. So if you go and purchase a prepaid SIM from Coles or Woolies or the newsagents, guys, it's not going to work. You could even go direct to Telstra or Optus or any of the other carriers and purchase a SIM card, and it is still not going to work because it's going to be behind that CGNet that we talked about before. The business plans are obviously a different machine. People that run a business need to be able to receive data in a different way that maybe we do with our normal 4G carriers. So you must get yourself a business plan for Telstra or Optus, not the prepaid. And here's the kicker here, guys. Unfortunately, these will not be given out to you unless you have an ABN, an ABRN, and I'm not even entirely sure what that is, but obviously it's some sort of business number, or an ACN, which is an Australian company number. So you either have to have a registered business or a registered company in order to be able to get one of these cards from Telstra or Optus. If you do not have access to an ABN or ACN, then I'm sorry, guys, this is just not going to work from you. The other option that you may wish to explore, but it's not the topic of this video because, in fact, I just don't have the skill set to talk about this, but it is to set up a VPN. And I think that's Virtual Protocol Network. But anyway, whatever VPN stands for, VPN will leverage or will be able to use any 4G card to run, but it is going to require some additional technical know-how and skills from yourself to be able to set it up and, more importantly, to maintain it. I don't have those skills. I tried the VPN. It worked for a while. Guys, I like to be able to essentially plug a hotspot into a modem and know that it's going to work first time. So that is my plan here that I'm actually working with. So remember, stress, business plans only. You will need to purchase this either online or to go to the Telstra or the Optus shop, and you are going to need to be requesting a business plan. I can't stress that enough, guys. So if anybody sends me a comment via Facebook or Discord or the video and they say, hey, look, I've watched your content and it's not working, and then I ask, is it a business account? And they say, oh, no, it's not. Guys, please, what else do I have to do? So business account it is. Let's check out the various plans on what is actually available. The great thing is that a business plan is no more expensive than a normal SIM. It's just basically has a different functionality. These are the plans that are available right now at the time of recording. There is a 5 gigabyte plan for $15 a month, 30 gigabytes for $25, 75 gigabytes for $55, or 400 gigabytes for $75 as it currently stands right now. The good news is that if you are purchasing multiple hotspots, the Telstra plans will actually share data. So what I actually have with all of my SIMs, I have 2 of the large, and then all of the rest of them are small. And essentially all of that data goes into a pool, and all of the hotspots just use what they need. What do they actually need to operate? Well, it really does depend a lot on what the blockchain's doing. I'm just going to throw a figure out there based on sort of like a rough average of around about 75 gigs is what you're probably going to need to use per month for a hotspot to run at full speed. But if you have a look down here, it does say no excess data charges in Australia, and I've reinforced that over here, is no excess data charges in Australia, which means that you could operate on a $15 per month 5 gigabyte plan. You will use your 5 gigabytes in the first 5 days, and then for the remainder of the month, you're actually going to be running on 1.5 megabits per second, which, if you are lucky enough to actually have 1.5 megabits per second, is you are going to have more than sufficient speed and stability to run your hotspot. So effectively $15 a month is all it would cost. However, here's the thing, is that it can be slowed during busy periods, and I have seen that myself before I upgraded and purchased a couple of the 400 gig plans to throw on top. I just had a bunch of the 5 gigabyte plans. And what I found is my internet slowed. When there were updates being done, my hotspots would go into a stall mode, and then I would find that I would be chasing my tail. So I would encourage you, if it's possible, to try and maintain your hotspots for as long as you can at full 4G speed. Whilst the 1.5 does work, I'm just giving you my recommendation as to try and keep it at the full speed if you can. Now, if there are some terms and conditions in the Telstra, but they're a little bit harder to find. I'll cover Optus in a moment. I'm not entirely certain that if you were to run $15 a month for multiple months on end, given the fact that you will be utilizing at least 70 gigabytes per month, if Telstra will continue to honor your contract. I can't say for absolutely certain, but it's pretty clear here. Once I say I recommend that you don't run on slow if you can avoid it. So there's your options with the Telstra plan. What about Optus? Optus is very similar to Telstra. They have a 5 gig plan for $15 a month, 30 gig for $25, 60 gig for $45, or 100 gig for $60. If you think back to the Telstra plan is actually far better value when you start talking about the large or the extra large data plan. Once again, if you look down here, in fact, it doesn't say it there. Oh, there it is. No excess data charges. Once you exceed your individual data allowance, your speed will be capped at 1.5 megabits per second and slowed further in busy periods, just like Telstra. But here's the additional bit from Optus, and this is why I choose to go for the higher plans rather than opting for the really cheap plans, is that they operate the Fair Go policy, which applies to all these plans. Its purpose is to ensure that all customers can access the services and don't use da-da-da-da-da-da. And if we roll down here, if we consider unreasonable, unacceptable, including but not limited to, not ordinary, commercial purpose use. And look, I've got to think, guys, that running a hotspot is definitely going to fall into one of those categories. So if you are using the Optus plan and also probably the Telstra plan, if you are using it long term on the cheaper plans, be prepared. At some point, they will probably not renew your contract. I don't feel that they would cut you off mid-month, but the fact is they may just not choose to renew your contract. So try not to be too cheap. After all, we do make a pretty good income from HNT, or at least most people are running a good setup are. So I recommend getting a plan that actually does fit the need. So there are the plans. But it doesn't stop there, because you could get yourself a SIM, and there are still some steps that you need to do. And guys, this is the magic area of this presentation. This is the content. This page and the next one is the content that most people are not aware of. And if you do not follow these next two steps, is your SIM card will still not work, even though it's a business SIM. It still won't function. Well, in fact, you will be able to run your hotspot, but it will run in relayed, because you won't be able to assign a static IP or port forwarding without these following steps. So if you are using a Telstra business data SIM for Helium access, you must, okay? There is no if, buts, or maybes here. This is an absolute must. You must link in with a Telstra small business account manager. Now, I find that the easiest way to do that is online through the app. I actually just type away, but you could go into a store. Not every store has a small business account manager, or you could try via the phone, but I just got sick of waiting on phones, so I don't go down that avenue. But you must deal with a Telstra small business account manager to gain this access. What they need to do is they need to activate on your SIM card, and it's each SIM, not just your account, it's every SIM must have the MICA code GPTEXB3. That's Golf Papa Tango Echo X-Ray Bravo 3. Yes, I know my phonetic alphabet. And that needs to be added to your SIM in order for you to be able to access the functions that you need. If you don't have that, it will not work. But guys, I plead of you, when you ring Telstra, do not ring up demanding stuff. Tactful is the way to go here, because Telstra are not terribly keen on actually putting this code on everybody that actually asks, because we're in fact turning on functionality that Telstra started to phase out a couple of years ago. And through a small business account manager, you can still access it right now. But you need to have an application. And I really hope that nobody sends this video to Telstra and says, look, watch this. I tell you it can happen, because before you know it, none of us will be able to access it. What I would encourage you to do or not to do is to phone them up, message them, or go into the store and say, hey, look, I'm running a crypto miner and I need to get this so I can earn more money. Because I guarantee that will draw all sorts of wrong answers that you don't want to get. So I would suggest that you just use a plausible excuse, like you are doing remote access for sensors, security cameras, anything you like. You're looking for remote access and you need to activate port forwarding. That's the magic word. What you're looking for is port forwarding. Ask them nicely. Explain your purposes. Remember, you're not crypto mining. You are out there running sensors. You're building an IoT network, which is what you're doing. Just miss the crypto bit and you'll probably be fine. Now, the great thing is there is no additional cost for this function. Once Telstra have added it to your account, the likelihood is it will take anywhere from maybe 4 hours to 12 hours to be activated. And once that's activated, you are just about home free. We'll run through the rest of it in a moment. Okay, well, what about Optus? Because Optus have a slightly different system. Now, this is where it gets incredibly easy to make mistakes and to get misunderstood. Guys, what you need is also to deal with an Optus small business account manager, and you need to request a static IP address, and it must be added to your data SIM. But before I start getting comments in the video and the like saying, no, you don't need a static IP to run a hotspot. No, you're absolutely correct. You don't need a static IP on your router to run a hotspot. It just so happens with the Telstra SIMs that the functionality only comes when you do have a static hotspot. They don't have the functionality like Telstra. So you need to request a static IP to be added to your data SIM. And then the data SIM, once that's got that functionality, like the mica code for Telstra, it will typically take 4 to 6 hours to be applied. And once you've added that, you then have the functionality. But there is some additional costs with Optus if you are going to request a static IP. There is a one-off cost of $20 per SIM, and there is a per SIM charge of $5 per month. So if you were on the, let's go back here, if you were on the $15 per month, 5 gig, you're now going to be paying for, you're going to be paying $35 in your first month and then $20 each month after that. So your costs are a little bit greater if you are going to go with the Optus setup. But of course, maybe Optus is your only option with you where you are. And I've got to be honest, they are actually a little bit easier to get. The small business account manager won't have any problems giving you a static IP if you ask for it and if you're prepared to pay for it. Whereas with Telstra, getting the mica code is actually a little bit more problematic. So there you go. Now, the 4G router, there are dozens of 4G routers available. I'm only going to be covering 3 in this video, and I'm going to be doing a quick summary of the steps to cover. And then what I will be doing is a hotspot, no, correction, is a router by router tutorial over the coming days and weeks. So there'll actually be a full hands-on tutorial actually showing you how to do it, not just telling you the basic steps to do it. But my preferred option is the Milesight router. Now, this is the UR32 here. As you can see on the screen, it's the UR32. Why do I like this hotspot? Now, most of the routers are actually going to have most of the functionality you want. But again, it may take a little bit more technical knowledge to set up. I like the Milesight because it's very easy to run, very easy to manage, to do all the functions that I'm going to explain. Where is it available? Well, it's available from the IoT store. So from our mate Sam over there in Perth, if you have purchased your Sense Cap from Sam or your Milesight, then you've already dealt with Sam before, and you can purchase the UR32L or the UR32. This one here is the UR32. It's actually got Wi-Fi. Okay, now most applications, you're not going to need the Wi-Fi. So effectively, your hotspot doesn't have that thing, that little antenna, and it just sort of looks something like that without the little antenna brackets on the top. It still does have one, and that is the antenna for your 4G connection. The uses of this is it does actually provide full remote access when it is paired up with a Milesight, with a SenseCap hotspot. This is why I love this setup, is that I have got my hotspots out with hosts, and the Milesight, correction, I keep saying Milesight, the SenseCap do have problems like all of the other hotspots. Every now and then they will stall. There will be some sort of issue. They'll fall behind. And if you have got hosted hotspots, you'll know that in most cases you have no choice but to either A, wait for the network to fix it itself, which can take days, potentially a week, if not longer, and in some cases it just won't fix itself at all. It requires manual intervention, which means that you need to drive to that particular location and do the fix. The good thing is when you pair up the SenseCap M1 hotspot with the Milesight UR32 or the 32L, you can very, very easily, and I will be covering this in the presentation that I do for this particular hotspot to explain how you do this, but you will have full remote access so that you can do the reboot, the resyncing, you can do turbo boost, you can do all of the things that you can normally do if you've got a SenseCap M1. So in my opinion, it is definitely the best option. And for those people who are incredibly, maybe if you have got a hotspot that is in just one of those cream locations, okay, so I'm talking about Mount Tambourine here in Queensland, southeast corner. You may be in the Blue Mountains overlooking Sydney. You may be sitting on Mount Dandenong or the Yangs down in Victoria, or goodness knows what mountain ranges there are elsewhere in the world or in the country. But your hotspot, your router rather, if it's running from Telstra or Optus, you've only got one network which you are leveraging off. The great thing with the Milesight is that it does allow you to put two SIM cards in there. So you could put a Telstra and an Optus, which gives you a fallback. Probably a bit of overkill for most people, but if you've got one of those cream locations that is generating, 1 to 1.5 HNT a day, I think it's actually probably worth getting an additional $15 SIM from the other carrier, sticking it in there, and it gives you a fallback should your primary carrier drop off for whatever reason. So there they are. You can purchase those from the IoT store. They're $220 for the UL32, which is the one that does not have the Wi-Fi. If you want them with Wi-Fi, I think it's about $270. You can also get them with to be able to run power over Ethernet, PoE. Yes, you know what I'm saying, power over Ethernet, PoE. But I'm not going to go into PoE, but that is just another option. If you are so inclined to run PoE, then that is a big plus for you as well. So there we have it. That is the Milesight. The next option, which is my option number 2, I think this is the best option to go with if you are not doing remote setups. So you have got the router at your own house. So it's your own house and you don't need to do remote access. Maybe you've just got really crappy internet, or you want that flexibility in your plan, or all of those other options that we covered at the start. What I would suggest is the GL-iNet Coli. Now, this is available through AliExpress, and it is by far the best price of the three that I'm covering here today. It's $142.58 at the time of recording. It will only run one SIM, but it does have Wi-Fi, so there is no option to have no Wi-Fi access. And if you are at home, having Wi-Fi is actually really good, because it means that if the router is in a remote location in your house or on the other end of the block, you can just take your laptop there and you don't have to worry about Ethernet. You just actually obviously connect into it via Wi-Fi, and then you can do all of your problem solving and your rebooting, etc., resyncing via that. So there is option number 2, which is the GL-iNet Coli, available through AliExpress. There are a couple of other locations to purchase it, but that is the best price. Downside to purchasing through AliExpress is their shipping. I've purchased 5 of these in 3 different shipments. I received the first one on its own in about 3 weeks. I received my next 2 in about 4 weeks, and I'm still waiting for my last 2 to arrive, and I ordered them now about a month and a half to 2 months ago. So obviously you can get caught in Chinese holidays and all sorts of things. So just be aware that AliExpress shipping is a bit of an issue, but they are the most affordable. And the last option that I will mention here is, in fact, the first router that I purchased, and that is the Teltonik RUT240 4G industrial router. It is available through the RF shop as well as a bunch of other places in Australia. Look, guys, these are very functional. They have got all of the functionality that you could want and an enormous amount more. When you go into the control panel of these things, there is an absolute squillions of functions that I have absolutely no idea what or how to work them. They are the most expensive at $275. So really, of the three options that I'm presenting there, I have one of these, as I say, only because it was the first unit that I purchased. I didn't realize that there were options at that point, and I purchased this probably about, for goodness, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. It was going to be part of my off-grid system. I won't be using this one now. I essentially use this as a spare here, and eventually I may even sell this because I don't use it at home. If for any where I don't need remote access, I'll use the Coli, and if I'm looking for remote access, which is most of my setups, I'll be going with the Milesight. Okay, now as I say, I will go through a full tutorial on each of these videos, so actually going through this right now is almost probably a little bit of overkill without being able to see the pictures on the screen, and I will actually utilize these again, but guys, this is, maybe you can just pause the video if you like and go through these steps. That is the steps for setting up a Milesight UR23. And the big thing down here is step number 10. Okay, step number 10 is the APN. Now, the APN is going to be something that is issued from Optus or from Telstra that is essentially the code that you put into your router that allows you to leverage off that business functionality that you have got from your two SIMs. When I actually do the tutorial, I will show you how to actually physically do that, but that's the APN. There's the GL-iNet. They're all very similar. Look, I would suggest whenever you purchase any hardware that is used for networking, whether it be a router, whether it be your hotspot, it just doesn't matter, guys. If it has firmware in it, I would suggest one of the first things you do is upgrade the firmware, because sometimes the firmware is many years old. It's the default firmware from maybe 3 or 4 years ago and doesn't have a lot of the features that are available today. So definitely one of the first things to do is actually upgrade your firmware for all of the hotspots. And the last one there is the Teltonika RUT240. So, guys, look, I mean, that's it for this one. I'm going to go back and I'm going to recap really quick. Okay, so to recap, a normal 4G plan that you purchase from Coles, Woolies, newsagents will not work for a Helium hotspot as it stands right now. You will be hidden behind CGNet, and there is no way that you can escape without using a VPN. If you want to actually get yourself a SIM that you can use right now, you will need to get a business account. Stress, they are only available through Telstra and Optus, and you must purchase them through a small business manager. Or it's actually just much easier to purchase them through a small business manager because they will understand what you want. It is such a minefield, the whole 4G coverage. Hopefully, guys, you have got something out of this. I know I've only just scratched the surface, and there are potentially still going to be questions that you have. But if you cover those main points that I covered here today, you are going to have a pretty easy path. And I will be actually doing a full tutorial on the operation of all 4 of those routers, hooking them up to a hotspot, doing port forwarding, the whole box and dice. So guys, I can't say look up above because I haven't recorded it yet. So what I would suggest you do is just look at my channel and you will find those there. All right, guys, well, that's about all I've got for you for today. So thanks very much for watching, and Helium Down Under out.